there are three confusions I see very commonly. One, they feel idea बहुत big होना चाहिए. मतलब big ideas are the base of everything. Second, they say कि funding बहुत जरूरी है. मतलब पहले वो funding arrange करने की कोशिश करते हैं before working out on the ground. और third, वो बोलते हैं sometimes they feel like I don't have a good network, like real network, or maybe network which I can work upon. तो ये तीनों में से actually क्या जरूरी है? कैसे they can begin? Like they're always confused on
Right.
these things.
My point is, I think for all the folks who are thinking to start a startup or begin their journey, no better time than now, these couple of years which have been, right? It's a great time to go about building your own business. Consumer startups, a lot of consumer startups come in for funding. एंड कंज्यूमर स्टार्टअप्स का प्राइमरीली अगर आप देखोगे बैलेंस शीट, कोई भी B2C धंधा है, सपोज मैं ये फोन कवर ही बेच रहा हूँ हाइपोथेटिकली मार्केट में, two things will be where basically they'll in their entire balance sheets and MIS they'll say that boss we need to acquire the customer, so which we call meta tax, वो ads चलानी है, right? दूसरा है inventory का पैसा, right? And most of the people which I tell them over here is boss जो inventory का पैसा है आपको बैंक भी दे सकता है, right? Now the problem statement over there then goes is नहीं बैंक मुझे पैसा नहीं दे रहा क्योंकि नई कंपनी है, ठीक है बिल्कुल सही बात है, आप फाउंडर पे फिर वो लोन ले लो, बट देन फाउंडर्स को लोन नहीं लेना होता बिकॉज लोन ऑल्सो इज समथिंग विच इन द इंडियन कॉन्टेक्स्ट correct liability. But this is what I meant, that a founder's journey is not easy. These are the decisions and these are the things in life which you have to basically take care of, but the reward payoff which happens later is unreal. More importantly, any entrepreneur should just feel about value creation. पैसा बाद में आ जाएगा अगर आप true value और product बना रहे हो, right? By that what I mean is इवन इफ इट्स अ किराने की दुकान, और मैं अभी भी लोगों को बोलता हूँ कमिंग फ्रॉम अ फूड टेक, अगर द बेस्ट मॉडल इज ठेला मॉडल. अगर कोई मोमो का ठेला लगा रहा है, सबसे बेस्ट मॉडल है.
Hello, everyone. So today we are going to understand in depth what is there on the other side of the table. Since we are a channel who is watched by most of young career professionals, and we always put our WhatsApp link in the description. So we interact with at least 800, 900 students every month, and they are the professionals, those who are in the industry, working in the industry. The ultimate goal is always starting their startup and yes, raising the funds. And they don't know what is there on the other person's mind when they actually go for pitching, raising funds, and so on and so forth. So for that, today we have Mr. Mohit Walia, who started his journey in year 2011, worked with a lot of companies, a lot of industries, started his own startup, helped investors, now building Allocator One. So thank you so much, Mohit, for joining us. Very warm welcome.
Thank you for this opportunity. I hope that your audience sees some value and we are able to create something valuable for them. Other than that, it's obviously a great conversation with you, right? So coming right in, I think to the topics which you have basically discussed about fundraising and entrepreneurs, etc. Broadly, I think what I would suggest to everyone is, I think it's a great time to build in India right now. I think what exposures and times, as we were discussing right before this in our introduction which was given, right? Back then when we were building back in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, 15, capital was not as easily accessible as what capital is right now, right? As I was mentioning, with that one particular startup, we had to solve for the payment problem. जब UPI वो नहीं थी, तब वो SMS से करके VAS service, press one, so on and so forth. So structurally on a technology layer also, you had to solve for so many problems which entrepreneurs today don't have, right? So for example, starting a subscription service like with press play, which we're trying to do, right? At that particular point of time, हम लोग subscription सोच ही नहीं सकते थे because Paytm और UPI नहीं था, right? Now, if an entrepreneur going right now, it's so easy for them to go and do that is because they have that technological backbone now to enable them to start those businesses and think a little bit wild and crazy, right? So my point is, I think for all the folks who are thinking to start a startup or begin their journey, no better time than now, these couple of years which have been, right? It's a great time to go about building your own business because of the fact, number one, you have that skeleton of technology stack, which is powered by your UPIs of the world. Second is, of course, thanks to Geo and all, internet accessibility, right? So you can get that distribution across people. You can get your app downloaded, idea downloaded, or even as simple, our video can be seen as someone sitting in any tier 2, tier 3, or any random city in the world, right? So accessibility
Absolutely.
has been given. There's a core layer of payments which support basically any kind of thought processes, etc. But the most important on top of that, that the top of the cake would also be the fact that eyes are on India, right? So, for example, when we are going on having meetings, etc., and now I'm talking on a global perspective as well, not only from a micro Indian landscape, but if we are in rooms in Singapore, if we are rooms in Dubai, if we are
Mm-hmm.
rooms in London, anywhere where we go, India is always spoken about, right? There is no conversation which goes about that India ka naam nahi aata. There are these two, three, four places only where basically the markets are spoken about, and India is definitely one of those two, three places, right? So what I'm trying to say is on a macro geopolitical global perspective, India is highlighted in a good manner. On a micro perspective, we have that technological tech stack to enable entrepreneurs. Plus, we also have now people who are ready to pay with the onset of credit cards being available, consumerism being so high, access of money and dispersing money has become easier than before. So
Mm-hmm.
beautiful time for anyone to come about and think of building a business, right? So that is what I would basically say on the onset of it, is that if someone's thinking about it, please go ahead. Now how to go about is that then we'll discuss कि कैसे वो बनाया जा सकता है. But हाँ, अगर आइडिया है, सोच रहे हो बनाने का, बहुत अच्छी चीज है, बहुत अच्छा टाइम है अभी बनाने के लिए
अरे
बिजनेस.
वाह, thank you. So there are three confusions I see very commonly. One, they feel idea बहुत big होना चाहिए, मतलब big ideas are the base of everything. Second, they say कि funding बहुत जरूरी है. मतलब पहले वो funding arrange करने की कोशिश करते हैं before working out on the ground. और third, वो बोलते हैं sometimes they feel like I don't have a good network, like real network, or maybe network which I can work upon. तो ये तीनों में से actually क्या जरूरी है, कैसे they can begin, like they're always confused on
Right.
these things.
I think I'm going to give a very different point of view. So we discussed
Mhm.
upon idea bada hona chahiye, right?
Mhm.
Funding is important, and third is network, right?
Mhm.
One thing which I would like to highlight, so for the audience, since we have been discussing for some time, so you have context as well, but for the audiences as well, right?
Mhm.
So I've been on the other side of the table. So for example, as I
Mhm.
mentioned before, engineering by background, but decided
Mhm.
very early on कि engineering नहीं करनी. Then घर वाले
Mhm.
बोले हाय स्यापा कि अब क्या करेगा मुंडा, right? Got into Airtel, corporate, telecom, first couple of years of my life, right? Then, so basically, as I mentioned, so engineer, corporate, turned operator with Zomato and Press Play. So then turned the entrepreneur route and then became an investor in the last 2, 3 years. So mostly I've been on the other side of the table where basically I have been building things or raising money for my own startup. Lucky has it, God has been kind in the last 2, 3 years. Basically, now I've moved to the other side of the table, right? Which is the investor side and allocating side of the table, right? But out of my 13, 14 years of my career, 10 years though has been behind the table trying to raise. Last 3, 4 years is basically when I'm allocating capital as well, right? Coming from this experience, I think number one thing is what everyone needs to realize, and which is across all of the founders, which I keep on telling who I meet, young founders specifically, right? Every business is not VC fundable. So, जो आपका second point है, VC funding होनी नहीं चाहिए. I don't think so, right? I don't think every idea is a VC fundable idea. Second thing is basically one needs to realize is the moment you take in VC capital, your expectations from here go here. Does your business support? Does your supply chain support? Does your team support? There are separate set of questions and Pandora's box that you enter. So the second point I don't think is valid कि funding होनी चाहिए. Yes, you need some amount of capital, and this is as an entrepreneur I have faced the same problem, is because आपको bank account बनाना, GST setup करना, पहले initial, so it is a couple of lakhs, right? That is why they say that the best round to start with is that friends and family round. आपको that this is, they say that okay, I think let me put it this way. Unfortunately, fortunately, we have been making heroes of the success stories, right? Which is great, which is good for us to also look up to, be it the eternal capital, eternals in terms of Zomato, be it the Zomatos of the world, be it the IPOs of Paytms of the world. But there is a lot to learn from the failures, right? Now this is where your intelligence or knowledge pool also lies कि भाई यहाँ पर क्या गलतियां हुई, right? Why I basically mention upon this is because as an entrepreneur I also realized कि यार सब कुछ बोलते थे कि नहीं पहले आइडिया खड़ा कर दो फिर देखेंगे फंडिंग पे. Then I also realized अरे यार पैसे होते तो फिर मैं आपके पास क्यों आता. Fair question, right?
Mm.
This is what you need to realize is the first validation of the business needs to be done by you. right? This is where your friends and family probably comes in. This is where you do a friends and family route. Or if you're thinking to become an entrepreneur, my suggestion would be it's not the easy route. This is where that वो बोलते हैं it's a tough life. तो ये starting का यही है tough life, right? Either you save for 6-8 months and have
Hmm.
that much of money to give yourself that cushion, or you raise it from your house or whatever it is. I don't know, right? But this is that tough part, that initial kick-off part phase is this, right? Then इसके अंदर depend करता है अब आप किस इंडस्ट्री में भी जा रहे हो. B2B
Hmm.
SaaS है तो अलग गेम प्ले है, कंज्यूमर है तो अलग गेम पे है, prop tech, like there's so many things in the world which is going on. But the bottom line is that the initial set of capital or the initial validation of idea should be done by yourself, right? Now once that validation is done, then you have to take a decision कि boss, where do I take it out. अब इसके अंदर टेक्निकल jargons आ जाते हैं कि प्रोडक्ट मार्केट फिट आया नहीं आया, फलाना ढिमकाना. एज सिंपल एज दैट, देसी भाषा में, क्या कस्टमर आपको पैसे दे रहा है आपके प्रोडक्ट के लिए? नंबर वन. नंबर टू इज,
Hmm.
क्या वो फिर वापस आ रहा है आपके प्रोडक्ट के लिए? नंबर
Hmm.
थ्री, क्या वो किसी और को रेफर कर रहा है आपके प्रोडक्ट के लिए? अगर आपकी ये तीनों चीजें सॉल्व हो चुकी हैं, दैट इज व्हेन यू थिंक यू वांट समथिंग, right? But your initial 6-8 months need to be solving for these problems. Is he buying your product? Is he basically coming back to buy your product? And is he referring your particular product in his community or becoming an evangelist, right? Now these are the things which basically then will make a particular good example of a business. And again, I'll share another example of जो ये 1 2 3 को solve करके कर रहा है, and mind you, they've still not raised VC money, is this particular company called Chauffeur. Chauffeur is basically into premium cab booking, came about Blue Smart, whatever happened with Blue Smart, that's separate, but they're primarily across the Bangalore region.
Hmm.
Great cars, BYDs, very well maintained. Saw a gap in the market where basically all of these Ubers, etc., are not well maintained. Drivers don't
Hmm.
speak properly. For the women's safety is also an issue. So product ye wala nikal liya, high-end electric cars, and they're expensive by the way. So they took a niche. They didn't go the
Hmm.
mass route. They went to the niche route. So high-end product, right?
Hmm.
Great service. They got repeat orders also. मैं भी रेफर कर रहा हूँ कि भाई एक बार आप शॉफर ट्राई करना, अच्छी सर्विस है. सो दे कॉल्ड फॉर ऑल द थ्री. Then they came into the room, the founders, the what do we do now? Do we raise VC money? But the moment you raise VC money, उनके पास अभी सपोज 50-70 गाड़ियां हैं, उनको 500-700 करनी पड़ेंगी. 500-700 में ये कोर सर्विस गिर सकती है, right?
Hmm.
So they
Hmm.
decided not to
So
go
they are
that by.
catering to the niche only. Huh.
Correct. They didn't go and then raise VC money.
Hmm.
They just did a friends and family route, and in fact their consumers only became their investors. So उनके customers ने पैसे दे दिए कि boss, we like your service so much, we have used your cabs 7-8 times, please take our money to
Wow.
invest into cabs, right?
Huh.
So I'm giving a very contrarian
Hmm.
example. Of course I can give you a
Hmm.
lot of examples. वो मैं भी कोई जरूरत नहीं है. आप Inc 42 चले जाओ, yours studio चले जाओ, बथेरी startups मिल जाएंगी, 500K, 500 million, 1 million, 10 million. There are enough number of stories that side, but there are other stories too, right, which are not spoken about in the media, but that does not mean they're not good businesses, right? So to counter to the point number two, no, it's not necessary that every good business has to be VC funded, right? That you need to decide as founders, and by solving these three key: customer, repeat order, and referrals, NPS
Hmm.
score or whatever, अगर ये चीजें
Hmm.
हैं, then is when you need to reiterate and think that boss, can I business survive without this or not?
Hmm.
Another example to this is basically for consumer startups. A lot of
Hmm.
consumer startups come in for funding, and consumer startups का primarily अगर आप देखोगे बैलेंस शीट, कोई भी B2C धंधा है, सपोज मैं ये फोन कवर ही बेच रहा हूँ hypothetically market में, two things will be where basically they'll, in their entire balance sheets and MIS, they'll say that boss, we need to acquire the customer, so which we call meta tax, वो ads चलानी है, right?
Hmm.
दूसरा है इन्वेंट्री का पैसा, right?
Hmm.
And most of the people which I tell them over here is, boss, जो इन्वेंट्री का पैसा है आपको बैंक भी दे सकता है, right? Now the problem statement over there then goes is, नहीं बैंक मुझे पैसा नहीं दे रहा क्योंकि नई कंपनी है. ठीक है, बिल्कुल सही बात है, आप फाउंडर पे फिर वो लोन ले लो.
Hmm.
But then founders को लोन नहीं लेना होता, because loan also is something which in the Indian context है,
Liability.
है,
Huh.
correct, liability. But this is what I meant, that a founder's journey is not easy. These are the decisions and these are the things in life which you have to basically take care of. But the reward payoff which happens later is unreal. But these are the initial set of things which basically you have to take care of. So funding, not necessarily. नंबर वन पॉइंट बीइंग, आइडिया बड़ा होना चाहिए. अब फ्रॉम अ वीसी परस्पेक्टिव एंड फ्रॉम अ धंधा परस्पेक्टिव, ये
Hmm.
बेसिकली अगेन दो अलग हैं. सो फ्रॉम अ वीसी परस्पेक्टिव, yes, आइडिया बड़ा होना चाहिए. If basically you can't do 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 1000 quickly, it is not VC fundable. Because what people need to realize is, and ऑनेस्टली स्पीकिंग मुझे भी नहीं पता था, जब मैं ऑपरेटर और एक एंटरप्रेन्योर जाके फंडिंग उठा रहा था, मुझे भी ये पूरी पिक्चर क्लियर नहीं थी. इट इज ओनली व्हेन आई बिकेम एन इन्वेस्टर, स्टार्टेड वर्किंग फॉर अ फंड एंड नाउ वर्किंग फॉर अ ग्लोबल फंड ऑफ फंड्स, आई रियलाइज how things function is because VC is an alternate asset class which tells its investors ki, sorry for the lack of a better word, but andhe return aayenge. Andhe return, what I mean is, it's an asset class, and by the way, this is all true. It's actually a registered alternate asset class. It is there in the odds category along with your public stock markets, real estate, etc. So I go to an investor and say that, boss, there is basically an opportunity of wealth creation and value creation in the startup as an asset class, which is these private companies. Now within this, what I basically guarantee you in terms of, now there are things like hurdle rate, etc. But what I guarantee is this should ideally be giving you better returns than your real estate returns or your stock market returns. And the term which is used is IRR, right? That's the term which is used. Now when I'm going and telling this and raising investors money, जिसको आदत है 12-13% हर साल मार्केट से कमाने का, वो धंधा फिर वैसा होना चाहिए जो कम से कम 18-20% साल का रिटर्न दे रहा है. तो it has to grow at that exponential level, right?
Because
So
they're taking high risk also, so they're expecting high reward as well.
high risk, high rewards, as simple as that. Hence, to idea बड़ा होना नहीं चाहिए या होना चाहिए या नहीं होना चाहिए. The fundamental question is, is it the VC idea or is it a dhanda idea, right? Now, अगर if it is a VC idea, then fortunately, unfortunately, you have to think scale, right? As we were talking about before at Zomato, पहले एक ही हमारा ऑफिस होता था. When I joined in, सिर्फ छतरपुर में होते थे. Suddenly, within the first 3 months of joining in back in 2012, 2013, when startups and funding was not cool, we had to hire 1,000 people, launch 13 cities, 3 continents, right? That was then scale. अगर वो उस टाइम पे बोलते नहीं, सिर्फ 2 सिटी कर लो, सिर्फ 3-4 लोग हायर कर लो, right? That wouldn't have basically gone down in this particular path rate, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm trying to say is, it depends on the business and idea. If it is VC central, yes, then the idea has to be big, right? It is what it is because that is what this asset class is promised to its investors, right? Otherwise, ये सारा का सारा पैसा बंदा, suppose as an investor also, मैं फिर स्टॉक मार्केट में लगा देता भाई. मेरे को पोस्ट टैक्स कट कुट के 15-18% आ रहा है, लॉन्ग टर्म गेन 30% कटा के वो सारा कुछ करके 12-13% आ रहा है, बहुत बढ़िया है, right? But if I'm putting it into something like this, I need to see scale. So that is number two. Then becomes is with the idea piece. If it's not a VC fundable, that is also a good thing, is because it can be a good dhanda. इंडिया में अभी what I personally believe, ये धंधा market is also a very good market given your SME IPOs which are opening up, right? I also fundamentally believe the government is basically promoting your self-reliance, Viksit Bharat, right? More importantly, any entrepreneur should just feel about value creation. पैसा बाद में आ जाएगा अगर आप true value और product बना रहे हो, right? By that what I mean is, even if it's a किराने की दुकान, और मैं अभी भी लोगों को बोलता हूँ coming from a food tech, अगर the best model is ठेला मॉडल. अगर कोई मोमो का ठेला लगा रहा है, सबसे बेस्ट मॉडल है भाई. तुम्हारा प्रोडक्ट है, सुबह दुकान लगती है, रात को
वो
कैश में.
ग्लैमरस नहीं लगता ना.
The glam हटा दो. This is what basically, that's why I say that we basically publicize and fascinate so much about these IPOs, these founders, their McLarens and their cars. That is good, but the real learnings are here, right? ये हो जाएगा अगर आप ये करते हो पहले. And for example, give the devil the due. I really respect Dipinder as a founder, because I've seen the journey way back then, as I was mentioning, 2012, 2013, so on and so forth. They have really worked on themselves also as founders. Not only the company, team भी बढ़िया बनाया, product भी बढ़िया बनाया, scale भी बढ़िया करा. But I have seen them grow as founders personally in the last 10-12 years. Like for example, they used to be so socially shy, right? Dipinder used to have a speech problem as well, but you have seen that guy work on himself and see what he is right now, right? So again, he's gone through these trenches and then this story comes in. Let's talk more about these stories. ये तो है ही है, but ये वाली कहानी किसको पता है, right? So what I was saying was about non-VC. Now the idea wala point, VC money hona nahi chahiye ya hona chahiye, I don't think it's mandatory. Going back to the idea, if the idea is to raise VC money, then it has to be big. Otherwise, it does not make any sense. Number two, even if it is not a VC idea, I still feel that it's a great thing because the markets will support you. Why is that so? Because in the entire value chain, right? The only person who basically creates the real value is at the start, जो वो प्रोडक्ट वो मोमो बना रहा है या वो मोमो बेच रहा है या सीमेंट बना रहा है या आटा बना रहा है या पैकेजिंग, क्रिएशन ऑफ वैल्यू वही है। उसके बाद सप्लाई चेन में क्या होगा, सपोज आप दवाई भी बना रहे हो, आपने दवाई बना दी, दवाई के बाद आप डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर को दोगे, डिस्ट्रीब्यूटर रिटेलर को देगा, रिटेलर कस्टमर को देगा, बट सबसे पहली वैल्यू एड तो यहाँ पर हो रही क्रिएट बेसिकली। हाँ, वो बच्चों का पॉइंट सही था, अगर सब कुछ डॉट एआई अभी होता तो फंडिंग मिल जाती, बट वो 2-3 साल पहले की बात है, अब तो ऑफ कोर्स दैट्स नॉट द केस। बट अगेन इट्स दिस इज समथिंग व्हिच बेसिकली एनीवन एंड एवरीवन नीड्स टू टेक अ पॉज एंड रियलाइज that this is a cycle with every new technology which comes in. Okay, and I'll give two other examples apart from AI. एक आया था IoT wave कि सडनली वो सब कुछ ब्लूटूथ इनेबल, बल्ब ऑन कर दो, फोन ऑन कर दो, एवरीथिंग वाज IoT 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 IoT। दिस वाज 2013 टू 2015, राइट? तब सब कुछ अपने पिच डेक्स में IoT डाल रहे थे, IoT इनेबल्ड IoT इनेबल्ड IoT इनेबल्ड, राइट? Capital does flow there because that is what whole VC is, that hey, risk, can you create something which is an outlier value, because power law says that 1 in 100 will give you your returner of all your other 99 as well. Hence capital starts to flow at the start जब कोई भी नई टेक्नोलॉजी आती है, राइट? बट उससे क्या होता है, जब आप स्टार्टिंग के 1-2 साल में ये हवा आती है जो भी IoT की आती है, उसके अंदर आप पैसा डाल देते हो, आधी से ज्यादा कंपनियां बंद हो जाती है। In the next 2 to 5 years, then you become mature investors, is because then you understand the nuances of these technologies, क्योंकि पहले उसको नहीं पता होता, right? The same thing as I was quoting this example of IoT, then the next wave came in was blockchain. Everything with .io domain name, crypto, blockchain, ये वो सबको funding मिल रही थी globally, and now I'm talking about, right? But then again, same capital started to flow, a lot of companies ran away, money got lost, but then from there they do understand that okay, there are only now then few protocols, like for example Ethereum के ऊपर आप smart contracts बना सकते हो, Solana के ऊपर आप काम कर सकते हो, Ripple is being used for basically financial and payment gateways, but that intelligence comes in after a while, but तब तक वही bubble inflate होता है। लास्ट जो आपने बोला फिर वो ये AI bubble, right? Suddenly everything .ai, money, money, money got pumped in, got ballooned, right? But investors have become smart and mature. They now do understand the technology better, right? But this is cyclical. What I'm trying to say is basically there will be something else which
Like
will
it
come
will
up.
come and go, it will come and go. In fact, you will find it funny. मैं PhD कर रही हूँ तो हमारे टॉपिक में भी everybody was saying कि इसके साथ कुछ AI जोड़ लो कि maybe how this domain will change after AI, how this
Yeah.
shift will come after AI, performance
Uh,
marketing with AI, like that. तो उसमें भी हमें मतलब motivate किया to all the batchmates कि AI जोड़ के देखो।
नहीं नहीं नहीं, आई डोंट थिंक किसी चीज में जहां पर नहीं जोड़ना वहां पर मत जोड़ो, बिकॉज एज आई सेड people have become more smart and mature as to कि what is actual AI and what is not actual AI। पहले तो ये भी नहीं पता था, राइट? नाउ लोगों को पता चल गया, information is decentralized enough, capital has gone in, they've spoken to so many startups and companies, so on and so forth, so you can separate the riff from the raff. So what I'm trying to say is, if not AI, there will be cycles. But I go back to my core point. Any new technology cycle, if from an existing business model, can it create true value? Then yes, karo. फालतू में मत डालो, right? Effectively, what is happening, right? सारे पुराने धंधे में जो चल रहा था पहले, फॉर एग्जांपल क्या होता था, कोल्ड स्टोरेज रूम्स में, बहुत बेसिक धंधा के बेसिकली बात करता हूँ, कोल्ड स्टोरेज रूम्स होते थे जहाँ पे आलू प्याज टमाटर, मतलब आगरा में बहुत मिलेंगे आपको, पोटेटो कोल्ड स्टोरेज, राइट? वहां पर वो टेम्परेचर का वो नॉर्मल वो सुई थी, वो बंदा देखता था एसी ऑन है नहीं है। IoT आया, IoT ने कुछ अलग नहीं करा भाई, वही कोल्ड स्टोरेज है, उसके अंदर सेंसर लगा दिया, अब मैं अपने ऑफिस में बैठ के ऐप पे देख सकता हूँ, राइट? बेसिक धंधा स्टिल रिमेन्स द सेम। अब उसके ऊपर AI आ गया। AI ने क्या करा, अरे भाई पिछले 1 साल में यहाँ यहाँ टाइम पे इतने इतने टाइम पे बत्ती जाती है, जिसकी वजह से इतना डाउन टाइम, जिसकी वजह से इतना टन ऑफ आलू लॉस हुआ, दिस कुड बी अ प्रॉब्लम स्टेटमेंट है। एक वो एनालिसिस इंटेलिजेंस इंजन लगा दी, बट कोर धंधा तो अभी भी वही है। आलू थोड़ा ना मैं मार, आलू तो अभी भी उसी वेयरहाउस में उसी एसी से चल रहा है, राइट? बट now because of these add-on layers there is true value being added in the business. Now I know कि बॉस ओके इतने से इतने आर पे यहाँ पर मेरा जनरेटर होना चाहिए, जनरेटर के अंदर तेल होना चाहिए। Now I'm going on the operational lens of it, right? There cannot be a downtime where the generator is not backing or the generator does not have fuel, right? Now this is where I'm talking about a true value add in a basic dhanda as a cold storage where you can see, but that doesn't mean कि मैं मतलब AI agent for this that blah blah blah, वो नहीं, मतलब वो नहीं चलेगा। So I think it has to be relevant and there has to
Mhm,
be a true value add. Then
mhm.
only yes. Otherwise, don't show something for the sake of showing.
Cool, great. So अब मुझे फिर से थोड़ा सा curiosity हो रही है about your journey. So we discussed that when you first started, you, just after working for two companies, that was around 3 years or 3.5 years of work experience, you started your own startup. You
Yeah.
even got funding raised as well.
Yeah.
So अब अगर आप उसको compare करते हैं that particular experience and now, what do you think are the basic mistakes which you did or you were prone to do, which has to be avoided for somebody who is starting now?
Interesting. I think the mistakes and the questions still remain the same. तब भी हमें लगता
Mm-hmm.
था कि यार अगर हमने बेसिकली आईआईटी आईआईएम या हार्वर्ड से कर रखी होती तो नेटवर्क होता तो पैसे और मिल जाते, राइट? आई थिंक
Mm-hmm.
क्वेश्चन स्टिल रिमेन द सेम फ्रॉम देन टू नाउ, बट what mistakes which basically were done then, which I would tell folks today that hey, this is not a cool thing, right? इनिशियली तो हमने बेसिकली ये कूल लगता है जोमेटो पे हमने बिल्ड करा, वो फंडिंग राउंड देखी, सो वी सॉ द अगेन द शाइनी पीसेस which gets reported in media etc, but we never go deep into the what goes on actually at the back end to make those shiny pieces, right? So I think I won't say mistakes as such, but I think there are certain things which every entrepreneur or an aspiring student who wants to be an entrepreneur has to be really cognizant and aware about. Is a it's a very lonely journey, right? No one else will feel your pain when basically suppose अब छोटी भी चीज कर लो, अगेन गोइंग बैक टू द ठेला, राइट? आपने ठेला लगा लिया, 5-10 हजार की मोमो की इन्वेंट्री ले ली, राइट? बाय चांस गॉड फॉरबिड नहीं बिका, nobody else will feel that pain as you will feel your pain, is because तुम्हारा पैसा ठुका है, तुम्हारा बेसिकली टाइम लगा है, वो जो दर्द होगा जब वापस आके विद जीरो सेल्स हो गए वो आपको फील होगी. सो ए इट्स अ वेरी लोनली जर्नी and you have to be ready for that. So that comes with a certain set of, boss, please try and do things, read a lot more, and it might sound very weird, but things like meditate, take out time for yourself, work out, is because that is how mentally you will be strong enough to feel and take care of these downfalls, because that is one thing which is cognizant. Downfall aega, every day is not going to be a good day, but now as an entrepreneur or a founder, how do you operate on that bad day creates the main difference, right? Now this is what I learned the hard way, is because हमको लगा था सब कुछ रोजी होगा, स्टार्टिंग में ही फंडिंग मिल गई, बीच में लेकिन जब टफ टाइम्स आए तब हमें नहीं समझ में आया क्या हुआ, right? Then you resort to alternate ways to kind of cope up with that particular stress that affects your health. Then there's burnout, so on and so forth. It affects your relationships as well, right? Because mentally you're always stressed, mentally you're under pressure, कोई आके कुछ कह देता है, you suddenly become reactive, right? समझ में नहीं आता उस टाइम पे, जब आप उस इक्वेशन से बाहर निकलते हो, दैट इज व्हेन यू रियलाइज कि ओ शिट यार, ये तो मतलब अलग ही चीज हो रही थी मेरे साथ. सो understanding, I think it's not a problem statement, it's not a mistake, it's not anything, but one core learning is understanding how to manage yourself in tough times becomes really important, because it is going to be a lonely journey. If you have co-founders, great. If you, and now this is another thing, having co-founders is a good thing in your journey, is because वो balance हो जाता है, राइट? एक बंदा नहीं कर पाता, आपके भी पर्सनल कमिटमेंट्स होती हैं, तबीयत खराब होती है, सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ. यू हैव टू बिल्ड अ सिस्टम एंड स्ट्रक्चर एंड टीम्स which works minus you, right? So what I'm trying to say, number one basically learning which I would like to share is, please learn how to take care of yourself, your health, your mental health, your physical health, is because that is the most important thing. क्योंकि आपका बिजनेस आप ही को दिखता है. सो you're अगर टीम कहीं कुछ होती है आपके पास आएगी, कंपनी में कहीं कुछ होती है आपके पास आएगी, अगर आप ही वो मेंटली साउंड नहीं हो तो कैसे तुम सही सोल्यूशन दोगे, right? So I think that is the number one learning. Number two learning actually was, after shutting down my startup, was the problem statement. What happens with us founders is our companies, products, etc., and I'm not saying a good thing or a bad thing, hota hai, it's but natural, whatever we are building becomes an extension of ourselves. Like for example, my last startup, which was basically got acquired by a firm, it was called Kitchens on Rent, Chapter Foods, right? For me, for 3 years of my life, Mohit is Kitchens on Rent, Chapter Foods. Chapter on Foods is Mohit, right? After I sold the company, right, I was like, who am I? Because everything what had associated with was the organization, and the organization was an extension of me and my personality and my soul, right? So what I'm trying to suggest to people is, you need that passion. वो you need that conviction, you need that hustle. But then again आपको पता होना चाहिए कि यार मैं एक ऐसा बंदा हूँ, मुझे हाइपोथेटिकली जिम पसंद है, हॉर्स राइडिंग पसंद है, क्रिकेट पसंद है, रीडिंग पसंद है, ड्राइविंग पसंद है या ट्रैवल पसंद है, वो मत छोड़ना. Right, it could be that before you became an entrepreneur working 9 to 5, you could manage suppose 3-4 trips to the hills in a year. It could be क्योंकि आपका जॉब हो रहा है, जॉब छोड़ के अब आप अपना कंपनी बना रहे हो, वो 3-4 trips 1-2 हो जाए, but make sure you do those 1-2s. Don't make it zero. Don't lose yourself into that process. Right. So I think the first thing is managing tough times becomes important. Not losing yourself becomes important. And the top of the thing is, which I've learned from most of these successful entrepreneurs also, keep working on yourself. As a founder, when you're growing, your company goes through different stages: 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100, right? The founder which you were at the 0 to 1 stage cannot be the same person when you're at 10 to 100. Your personality cannot be the same. Every stage will ask you as a founder to upskill yourself in one way or not. मैं ये मतलब नहीं कह रहा कि भाई Excel सीख लो, complicated formula सीख लो, but the way of thinking, the way you go about building teams, the way you go about thinking processes, as a founder, you have to keep on changing and adapting. So if you cannot be a chameleon with the evolving stages of the company, you can't function as a good founder. Right. So three things I think to summarize learnings would be is number one, take care of yourself, your health, your mental health, extremely important. Don't lose yourself. Be true to who you are, your hobbies, etc., etc., because that is also equally important. And number three is keep evolving. Right. If you're not doing that, then you're not doing justice to your organization. If you're still the same founder which you were 5 years back, भाई कंपनी आगे निकल गई, तुम अभी तक वैसे सोच रहे हो, तो मतलब it's not a good thing, right? So yeah,
That
I think
was very deep.
but this is what happens when you go deep into the trenches and then you come and zoom out. So I think I've compressed my learnings of 8 to 10 years in this.
Wow, thank you. So, Mohit, next thing is again going back to your journey since you started your own first venture with your co-founders, raised the funding. Then, because of what we discussed was the new learnings, you thought to wrap it up, and then you moved to the 9 to 5 job again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was it feeling like a demotion? Was it like something which is anti-glamorous or something? कैसे deal किया या उस time सोच क्या थी?
Interesting. So basically, the story there was that, as I mentioned, so Airtel happened. Airtel was right after college,
Hmm.
university
Hmm.
graduation. Did that for a couple of years. Young 21, 22-year-old got bored. कि यार ये 9 से 5 नहीं हो रहा, कुछ hustle चाहिए. Zomato happened very early on when single office, only 40, 50 people, saw that blitz scale, then went about press play with Anand, George, Sachi, Harman, and I.
Hmm.
Press play पे fundraising हुई, then went about to build my own food tech startup, raised a small amount of money as well, scale that out. Cut to the pandemic came in. And when the pandemic came in, then that was a decision that what do you do? That's another difficult call for founders to make. कितना खींचोगे या do you like cut the cord, right? It's time to kind of either shut down or think of exit options, for the lack of a better word. You need to figure out what your exit strategy is then. So as a founder, you also need to know your entry and exit strategy. And there's no right or wrong exit strategy. Like, for example, if I meet a founder today who comes in and says that, hey, I'm building this consumer product and I know for a fact that I'll get acquired by a PNG or a Hindustan Unilever, I'll be like, great. If a founder comes in and says that, hey, I'm creating something new and 10 years down the line, I want to do an IPO, I'll be like, great. Right. So having an exit strategy is important, whatever that might be. Right. So my exit strategy at that point became to sell the company or get acquired at that particular point of time. Paying salaries became difficult, so on and so forth. For me, going back to the 9 to 5 actually was going back to the learning, which I said. I have made those mistakes, hence those learnings, right? So I associated myself with the company only, right? तो मैंने basically company बेच दी. Company बेचने के बाद एक proper $1 billion firm startup फिर से पूरी join कर ली, right? But for me, what happened was I became a question mark in my own head कि यार, who am I? Like,
वैक्यूम आपके अंदर वो डेवलप हो गया.
absolutely. So my thing was that to prove to myself in a way that, hey, you did what you had to do with your startups. Can you now, तू क्या फोड़ सकता है एक organization, बड़ी organization में भी, because you've been through that journey अब. Now there are no excuses कि experience नहीं है, बच्चे हो, exposure नहीं है, ये सब फलाना ढिमकाना, वो सारी excuses अब side में जा चुकी है. क्या तू फोड़ सकता है भाई? Like that was the, I think, the fundamental question which I basically was asking myself, which became because of the fact is because I was so entrenched in terms of my organization that my organization became an extension of me. Right, this was it, this is me, I am this. और जैसी वो बेच दी, वो चली गई एकदम से, as you rightly mentioned, there's a vacuum. As a boss, who am I? like ab kya karu, like, so to kind of answer that question is when that particular gig at Ninja Card happened. Ninja Card actually acqui-hired us, a bunch of us from my organization. One person went for an MBA, one person got another job, but the rest of the folks, we all of course joined the organization to try and contribute to it. And it was a great learning experience, to be very candid, because before that was a food tech startup of my own side. Zomato was also there. This is what I call the right hand side. मतलब सब्जी उग चुकी है, सब्जी मंडी पहुंच चुकी है, मंडी से बिक के किचन में आ गया, किचन पे ऑर्डर लग गया है, तो ये दिस इज ऑल राइट हैंड साइड. व्हाट आई वांटेड टू सी वाज आल्सो द लेफ्ट हैंड साइड, द एंटायर. तब उस टाइम पे वो भी शुरू हो गया था, फार्म टू फोक,
Hmm.
ये दैट राइट. सो आई वांटेड टू सी द फार्म साइड, आई सीन द फोक साइड, राइट. So the question for me and why I did that, and it was not 9 to 5, etc. At that particular point of time, it was that basically, who am I, and क्या मैं फोड़ सकता हूँ, right? That was it. That was fundamentally it, because there were 2, 3 other companies also which had gotten acqui-hired. My peers at the time were all IIT IIMs, IIT ISBs. I was the only non-coding engineer, वो भी एक normal tier 2 university से करते हुए, etc. Right? So that fueled me more, I think. And that is why then basically the journey became even better and that growth came even there. But the fundamental question which I think I wanted to solve for myself was, who am I? That's why Ninja Card.
So you got succeeded?
Yeah, I would say so, for sure. I think that was a good term,
That
I think.
just was my personal curiosity.
Yeah. No, no, for sure. I think on a tangible lens at that particular point of time, what had happened was Ninja Cart was basically going to raise its next round, right?
Mhm.
And our co-founder Thiru, he had a bunch of business model which he knew would give him that journey, but he was also pretty clear. He's like, basically, इसके लिए ये business models को try करने के लिए मैं entrepreneurs को ही लाऊंगा, क्योंकि वही खुराफाती और पागल होते हैं, right? Because if you come with then corporate proper MBA structure, वो नहीं नहीं ये नहीं चलेगा. You have a way of thinking, वो बेसिकली put कहते हैं इसको सक्सेसफुल करने के लिए मुझे चाहिए जो खुराफाती, who do against the
The
norm, the
hustlers, we call it.
basically there were 4, 5 of us which got in, and it was successful because I think we were successful in scaling that business. So from a 0 rupee business, from a day, I think at the end of it, at the end of 1 year, I was handling close to, in terms of a PNL, it close to 460 crores of a PNL, right? Puri North India ki, matlab, it doesn't sound fancy, but think of the scale. So I was handling the entire North region at the start of it when we had basically gotten acqui-hired. पूरे North की सब्जियां हम घुमाते थे, right? So यहाँ से हिमाचल से ये वो, so on and so forth. But you think of the scale of it, it's a very big scale. So yes, successful there. We raised $209 million at a valuation of right under $1 billion at that particular point of time. Since again, I'll tell you in terms of a little bit more story. उस particular point of time पे what had happened was मैंने गाड़ी पकड़ी और मैं बेसिकली 3 महीने 18,000 किलोमीटर गाड़ी चलाई, सिर्फ गाड़ी में रहा हूँ. हर एक किसान, खेत, ये वो, कहाँ क्या उगता है, क्या चीज है, क्या प्रॉब्लम स्टेटमेंट है सप्लाई चेन में. सो आई लिटरली लिव्ड आउट ऑफ माय कार फॉर 3.5 months. नो कनेक्शन टू द फैमिली, नथिंग, दिस एंड दैट. आई वाज लाइक, बॉस ये सीख के आते हैं कि ये चल क्या रहा है. Cut to, did well, scaled the particular business vertical. Then at the end of the stint was basically after raising the money, I was giving the responsibility along with 2 other of my teammates to build up their mergers and acquisition division. Right, that is when then I started to get on the other side of the table. इससे पहले, as I mentioned, operator, entrepreneur, पूरा full power वही करते करते करते. So we set up a $25 million mergers and acquisition division because Ninja Cart at that particular point of time was only in the perishables business, which is aloo, pyaz, tomato. Now for us to expand, we wanted to get into non-perishables also. So the idea was, do we basically start funding startups, grow them, nurture them, piggyback them with technology, and maybe become a possible acquisition route at the end of it, right? So that was basically then my second stint at the particular organization, right? So
तो यही मेरा नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन था. तो एज ए पर्सन हु इज कॉन्टिन्यूसली बिल्डिंग, रेजिंग फंड्स एंड ऑल, ट्रांजिशन टू एन इन्वेस्टर, ये कैसे
right.
हुआ? मतलब व्हाट वाज दोस मोमेंट आपको लगा हाँ दिस इज वेयर आई वांट टू गो नेक्स्ट एंड फोड़ना चाहता हूँ उस एरिया में?
Yeah, I think I'm still learning that particular piece because, as I mentioned, in my 15 years of work journey, 12 years has been entrepreneur, and 3 years, third year and fourth year now is on the investor side of things, right? It's a very simple thing. I think as an entrepreneur, when I used to go, or as any entrepreneur comes to me, they ask me, any कोई भी धंधा वाला सिर्फ बेसिकली 3 चीज पूछेगा आपसे, ठीक है? पैसे दिलवा दो, माल बिकवा दो, या किसी से कनेक्ट करवा दो, गो टू मार्केट, राइट? सो आइदर यू हेल्प विद फंड रेजिंग,
Interesting. हाँ.
right? Or you help with sales,
Hmm.
or you help with network connection. These are
Hmm.
it. And
Hmm.
of the three, capital is 50% of the problem. The rest will be 25, 25 or whatever ratios, but capital is 50% of the problem, right? So that's where basically 10-12 साल कर लिया, hustle कर ली, ये हो, then my idea was that, hey, I want to go to the other side of the table to see basically how things are. To be able to contribute in one of the three, या फिर
Hmm.
capital, या go to market, या sales, right?
Hmm.
And that's how basically even as an investor I kept on consulting and working with founders also always, कि बॉस क्या नया चल रहा है, क्या हेल्प कर सकता हूँ, क्या go to market में हेल्प कर सकता हूँ, so on and so forth. So I think it was to give back on these three spaces, be it capital, be it go to market, or be it basically sales as well, is what got me to investing. But the only thing which I wanted to keep it unique to myself is basically the operator lens. So I'm not a Harvard MBA. I'm not basically your BCG consultants and all of that jazz. वो मेरा है नहीं. At the start I did want to do it, but now I'm very cognizant that I don't want to do it, is because it keeps me true to myself, is because I'm an operator specialist, right? I come with that particular mindset. When I sit with the founder, I think one of the reasons why basically founders are okay talking to me as well is because I've been in the same trenches as you. मेरे सेम वो 0 to 1, 1 to 10, 10 to 100 जर्नीज हो चुकी है. मेरे पास भी वो दिन थे कि खुद के खाने के पैसे नहीं थे, खुद की गाड़ी बेच के पैसे लगाए हैं, फिर फंड रेजिंग भी करी है, फिर टीम हायरिंग भी करी है, सिक्योरिटी गार्ड से लेके सेल्स की बंदे की हायरिंग करी है, फिर न्यू प्रोडक्ट एक्सपेंशन में काम कर रखा है. लाइक I've been there in the trenches, same as you, so I feel your pain. It's not that you're talking to someone who's just done an MBA, sitting in an AC room making excels and trying to make sense of data, though that work also has value, not discounting that, but that's not me. I'm the person who's been on the road with you, मतलब हाथ के हाथ साथ बैठ के चल भाई साथ करते हैं, right? So that's what it was, that can I bring that operator lens into investing, given in these three parameters: fundraising, go to market, or network connects. So that's how basically this came about.
So what problem Allocator One is currently solving? Because I personally didn't have clarity on what is venture capital to venture capitalists to fund managers to these things. So
Right.
then I did a lot of chat GPTs and all to
Sure.
understand the concept in depth. So if for the audience, if you can simplify these things and tell us like what exactly is the space we are currently in.
I think मैं थोड़ा बहुत I might kind of tick off a few people if I say this also.
Mhm.
But again, coming from an entrepreneur's fund, like a proper entrepreneur's lens of view, right?
Mhm.
VCs are not it. That's what I'm trying to tell before also. Ki everything does
Mhm.
not need VC money. Your idea
Mhm.
is a good idea even without raising VC money. और अभी भी मैं same चीज बोल रहा हूँ कि VCs are not it. But now I'm coming now I'll zoom out from an operator entrepreneur, go into a financial and a fund manager
Mhm.
thought process, context
Mhm.
switch, right? In the scheme of things for startups, right? If that's the underlying asset, be it startup, be it a business, etc., right? There's a pyramid of people who fund it,
Mhm.
right? So there will be angel investors, HNIs, family offices, and also there'll be angel investors, right? So you do a friend and family angel investor round. उसके ऊपर होंगे VCs, which are venture capitalists. उसके ऊपर होते हैं fund of funds, right? उसके fund of funds also raised from multi-family offices, family offices, and banks. And उसके ऊपर होते हैं sovereign funds. So this is basically the pyramid of raising. What I'm trying to tell entrepreneurs is basically VCs भी भाई अपना पैसा नहीं लगाते, तो वो कोई भगवान मत बनाओ उनको. This is one problem statement which I also did, by the way, right? Whenever I used to go to VC, get panic and sweat patches and oh my god, फटती थी कि क्या हो रहा है ये वो, कि भगवान आ गया. नहीं भाई, VCs भगवान नहीं है. सबसे पहले you're talking to a human, human is talking to a human. Yes, that human has a lot of exposure across the market. So just think of it as a way कि मैं किसी किताब से मिलने आया हूं और इस किताब से मेरे को information निकालनी है. पैसे निकल गए वो बात की बात है,
Mhm.
right? So why I say this also is because as per SEBI guidelines, if it's a VC CAD 1 or a CAD 2 fund, up to 2.5% or 50 lakhs, whichever is lower. So what I'm trying to say is सिर्फ 2.5% of the fundraise basically उनकी जेब का लगा होता है मोस्टली. बाकी सब
Mhm.
मार्केट का ही पैसा होता है, बाकी लोगों का पैसा है, उनका खुद का भी पैसा नहीं होता. They are just fund managers, as simple as that. When you buy a mutual fund on an in money, there's a fund manager who manages your portfolio. It is the
Mhm.
same thing here. आपने फंड मैनेजर ऑफ एंड मनी को तो भगवान नहीं बनाया, तो VC को
Mhm.
क्यों भगवान बनाया भाई? right? So
Mm.
now coming to that particular point of time again, so startups raise from angel investors, VCs. So Allocator One is a fund of fund. So
Mm.
we back these VC funds, and VC funds further basically given to startups, right? So in the pyramid of things, as I was mentioning, so there's startups, angel investors, VC funds, fund of funds. Then on tops are your family offices, multi-family offices like your Berman family office, your TVS family office, Jindal family office, and banks. और उसके ऊपर होता है sovereign fund, pension funds. सब इसी pyramid से उठाते हैं, right?
Mm.
So a startup can also go to a family office and raise, right?
Mm.
A VC fund will also go to a family office and raise. A fund of fund will also go to a family office and raise. A family office might collaborate with the sovereign fund, right? But सबसे ऊपर फिर वो sovereign funds होते हैं. Sovereign funds बोले तो for example, and it's actually an example you can actually go and so the California Army Pension Fund has also parked some money in Zepto in this IPO and pre-IPO deal. So what does that mean? जैसे हमारा पीएफ कटता है, वहां पर
Mm.
कोई ओल्ड आर्मी ऑफिसर के पीएफ का जो क्यूमुलेटिव वो जो फंड है, उन्होंने जेप्टो के शेयर्स उठा रखे हैं भाई,
तभी तो
राइट?
10% दे पाएंगे उनको. Otherwise, they
हाँ,
will also have to put some their money somewhere. Oh, so
so
they are
these,
okay doing the high risk, like ऐसे होता है मतलब pension
I
fund
think
से
the
भी.
best. Yeah, so for example, so yeah, so what I'll say is basically over here, good question there, but the Western markets are more advanced than our markets, right? So the Europeans built about these financial structures and systems about venture capital banking. So
Mm.
Europeans started and ideated it, US scaled it, right?
Mm.
So they are far ahead in this journey, right? So I think their venture capital ecosystem is close to a century old. They have seen many of such cycles. अभी तक तो हमने दो तीन साइकिल ही देखी हैं, वो आराम से 8-10 साइकिल देख चुके हैं, राइट? सो द रिस्क एपेटाइट, सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ, एंड इट्स नॉट दैट वो पूरा अपने पेंशन फंड का पैसा इस एसेट क्लास में लगाते हैं. दे आल्सो हेज देयर बेट्स, राइट? बट व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू टेल फॉर द एंटरप्रेन्योर्स एंड एवरीथिंग, कि अगर सपोज कोई माई बाप है इस फंडिंग के केसेस में, तो ये बेसिकली सॉवरीन फंड्स एंड बैंक्स ही हैं. पैसा इन्हीं के पास है, राइट? सब इधर उधर से पैसा उठा के उन्हीं का पैसा आपको दे रहे हैं, right?
Mm.
So coming to Allocator One's perspective, so we're a fund of funds and we're a global fund of funds. The headquarters is in Vienna. What we do is we back first time or second time fund managers. That's what the GPs are, fund managers who are starting out funds in India. It's a global firm. We've backed close to 30 global funds. So from the US to LATAM to Luxembourg to India. In India, we backed Thea Ventures and Inoka Capital, one of the marquee investments in terms of the underlying startup, which our fund has basically backed, is this company called Sarla Aviation. They're doing really well. They've just gotten close to 1,000 crore of funding. They've just tied up with the Andhra government as well. So that's on the Indian landscape. One of the
Mm.
most interesting portfolio companies which we have on a global level is this AI app called Lovable, which a lot of these young folks would have heard. It's a no-code app kind of a thing. So in our portfolio, within the last 2.5-3 years, we already have 6 unicorns, so to speak, right?
Wow,
So
many
yeah,
congratulations.
thank you. मतलब मेरा भी अभी जर्नी नहीं है, that I think
Uh-huh.
kudos to Michael and Felix, because they
Yeah.
are the ones who basically started it off. But yeah, so fund of funds is the concept, and in India thus far the biggest fund of fund has been a government fund of fund called SIDBI. So SIDBI is a government fund of fund. So most of the VC funds, if you see, अगर आप सर्च भी करेंगे, आधे से ज्यादा ने SIDBI से भी पैसा उठा रखा है. As I was mentioning कि ये जो VC funds होते हैं, ये सारा पैसा खुद का भी नहीं लगाते, दो I'm not discounting. There is a lot of hard work in doing all of this, because over here you have to raise capital as a fund manager, then you have to have deal flow, then you have to do reviews, then you have to make investment memos, then you have to do portfolio management. So I'm not discounting their work, but what I'm trying to tell entrepreneurs is basically, please don't make anyone God. No one is in God mode. They're all humans which have access to knowledge or access to network. So think of it as humans who you can basically either get network or knowledge access. Capital mil gaya, nothing like it, right?
Mm.
That's how I
ये
would
बहुत
say.
सेटल करेंगे. जैसे हम लोग ना, वी हेल्प स्टूडेंट्स टू गेट इनटू वेरियस आईएम्स एंड द वंस दोज हु वांट टू डू इट विद देयर जॉब एंड स्टफ. They get a lot of anxiety and all that a day prior, and we always tell them it is okay. It is fine. I mean,
Uh,
you're just interacting, but वो वही वो sweat patch and all वो सब रहता है. अच्छा,
no,
आपने बताया that. हाँ जी.
No. I mean, just because of IMs and sweat patches and all of that anxiety as well, I think gone are the days where only tier one MBSs, because, for example, there are a lot of, barring the IITs and the BITS Pilanis of the world, there are a lot of founders which are coming from tier two, tier three universities and they're doing good jobs. The only difference does it make is life might be a little bit tougher, but that doesn't mean you won't succeed. Right? It's not guaranteed success, by the way. And also, FYI, for another entrepreneur or any of these students, if they're looking to start something, my only fundamental advice would be is सबसे पहले एक startup में काम कर लो. As an investor, as an entrepreneur, I'll respect you more अगर तुम मेरे साथ जंग लड़ चुके हो. Right? So that's an advice which I'd give. So don't worry
Wow.
about it. Mhm.
Got it. Thank you. You mentioned that you are basically choosing the first timer fund managers, VC, or the second timers. So, what exactly do you look in them? Like, what are those things? And you said that they only invest their own 2.5% के approximately उनका खुद का पैसा लगा होता है. तो क्या वो ये है कि उनका खुद का पैसा कितना ज्यादा लगा है? कोई सर्टेन ट्रेट आप देखते हैं, कोई पास रिकॉर्ड तो होगा नहीं ज्यादा. तो कैसे आप जज कर रहे हो? मतलब ऐसी
Interesting.
मुझे लगा कि
Yeah.
it is important.
Oh, that's a good question. I think what we do is basically, so there are these, so with Allocator One, so the idea which we have is basically, as a fund manager,
Hmm.
can you pick up on signals before they become noise? Okay. By that, what I give is, I'll give you an example of Thea Ventures, Priya Shah. Okay.
Hmm.
So everyone is talking about climate tech, climate tech, climate tech, climate tech. We had said yes to them 1.5, 2 years back only. Right. So before climate tech became a thing, we had realized that, boss, there is a signal and this particular person has adapted on this signal way before than the market noise. वैसे यही बात हो जाती है कि जैसे ही कोई फाइनेंशियल फिनटेक इन्फ्लुएंसर कोई बोलता है ना कि ये स्टॉक ले लो, मैं तो बोलता हूँ भाई स्टॉक बेचने का टाइम आ गया, बिकॉज अब ये नॉइज बन चुका है, ये सिग्नल नहीं है. Right?
Hmm.
Similarly, in this also, climate tech, now everyone is talking about it, but there are only few people who are actually working in climate tech 2, 3, 5 years back, right? Number one. Number two is, are you a specialist in that? Matlab, for example, I'm an operator who's built like consumer internet tech companies, etc., right? अगर मैं कल जाके बोलूं, and there's nothing wrong, I can do it also, but what I'm trying to say is, अगर मैं कल जाके बोलूं कि मैं एक robot taxi बना रहा हूँ, right?
Hmm.
I'm not a specialist in that, right? But if, for example, I say, hey, I'm building out a fund which is specifically focused on consumer and consumer tech because my background for 10, 12 years has been into building this, right? So there's either a specialist or I have operator expertise in this. So there has to be relevance, is because my fund is again an extension of me. Because मेरे को due diligence करनी है, what is the experience, so there has to be certain level of specialization when it comes. So are you able to pick on signals before it becomes a noise? Are you a specialist of this particular industry? Last but not the least, we do check also, is because if you're becoming a VC investor, have you done any angel investments or any prior track record over there? Have you seen those cycles also? You can't suddenly just become a VC investor. वो भी नहीं होता. आपने थोड़े बहुत यहाँ पर हाथ जलाए होंगे क्योंकि ये प्रोसेसेस कर रखी होगी, ड्यू डिलिजेंस, डील फ्लो, SSA, SHA, lawyers, valuations, up rounds, down rounds, so on and so forth. ये आपको पता होना चाहिए. So it's a mix of these three things. Can you pick up on signals before noise? Are you a specialist? And is there any prior experience as an investor? So these are the, I think, the top three things which we look at while evaluating first-time fund managers.
Okay. So this is all about this side of it, like till the time the funds get raised. I was doing my research and I found out it's not just about the funding. I mean, it's not just about the money which is given. It is also that the person or the VC or the fund manager plays an important role in expansion and creating strategies and so on. So it is with everywhere, like this is how it works, or it is selective, like how it is.
No, it's not. I mean, I think over here it's a little bit different and it is very subjective. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where it gets interesting, is because we have an अगर एक metric लोगे आप,
Mm-hmm.
so there will be certain eccentric
Mm-hmm.
founders who might not be coachable, and there
Mm-hmm.
are non-eccentric founders which are highly coachable, right? What I'm trying to say is basically, कुछ founders ऐसे होते हैं उनके पास clarity of thought होती है, उनको
Mm-hmm.
clarity of product होती है, उनको clarity of vision होती है. You can't poke them. You can't be like, नहीं मेरी सुन, मुझे ज्यादा पता है. वो बंदा बोलेगा भाई मैंने, so as I said, for example, जैसे food tech हो गया या कुछ हो गया, right? If I was starting anything again in food tech and a random investor comes and starts telling me ये, I'll be like, भाई मतलब where are you coming from? I've built this in the last 10, 12 years, so stop bothering me, right? Whereas there could be certain people who are great in building things and building tech products, but might need help, as I said, in go-to-market or sales connects. That's where an investor comes in and be like, okay, don't worry, I'll open doors for you. So it's not about just normal capital, it's about the other capital as well. So there's social capital, which is there in the network. There's intellectual capital. Can I help you build out these strategies? And of course, there's capital, which is money, right?
Mm.
So as a fund manager, as a GP, I need to understand in my underlying assets, or what is the personality type of such founders, or what is the stage of these companies, right? क्योंकि हर को आपकी ज्ञान की जरूरत नहीं होती, सबको विशेष टिप्पणी देने की जरूरत नहीं है, उसका सिंपल वो ट्रांजैक्शन है, बॉस you're a great founder, you know what you're doing, all you need is capital, thank you for allocating this much of my money in your cap table, here is your money, please now like run on your own, you don't really need me, right? Then there will be certain founders, great tech product folks, etc., might need help with connections or helping a go-to-market strategy, etc. That is when then you go work closely with them, build them out, help them, handhold them, and get them to that particular journey. But ये call आपको startup to startup, founder to founder लेनी पड़ेगी. It can't be मैं हर startup को help नहीं करता या मैं हर startup को help करता हूँ, क्योंकि वो फिर एज आई सेड वो पर्सनालिटी टाइप सबकी सेम नहीं होती. आप सेम, यू कांट पुट द सेम शू फिट्स ऑल फिलॉसफी. सो दैट्स द
Mm.
डिफरेंस आई वुड से.
So, I mean, आपने कुछ gap identify किया हो about what startup founders think about this journey of raising funds and what VC thinks about giving out the money. कोई major gap आपको लगता है कि यहाँ के understanding और यहाँ के understanding में है?
I think सबसे पहले, yeah, there is, and we've actually covered in this conversation both these points. Number one is basically when you go into a room with VCs, please don't think that they're gods. Number
Mm.
one, I've seen a lot of founders go in God mode,
Mm.
right? I don't know why God mode about the other person. I have been guilty of doing the same, right? I'm telling you कि मैंने भी ये गलती करी है. कोई फायदा नहीं है. वो दूसरा एक ह्यूमन ही है जिसके पास या फिर आपसे थोड़ा ज्यादा नेटवर्क एक्सेस है, या फिर
Mm.
आपके साथ थोड़ा ज्यादा इंडस्ट्री के नॉलेज, वो ही नोज सम डेटा सेट्स व्हिच आर मोर देन यू.
Mm.
So take it as a sponge. That's all you need to do, right? That is from one side. The other side, I would say, is basically what entrepreneurs also need to realize, which we've already covered. Every business idea need not be VC fundable, is because then the scale is different. So you need to really be cognizant of this fact कि बॉस कि क्या मेरा आइडिया VC फंडिंग, क्योंकि जैसे ही मैंने VC के पैसे ले लिए, वो 10 का 100,000 तो है ही है. We have already discussed why, because of course
Mm.
it's an alternate asset class, you have to give better returns in the market, so on and so forth, high risk, high reward. So are you
Mm.
sure you want to do this? So entrepreneurs need to be really aware of this fact that, hey, is my business actually a VC fundable business? And if it is not, do I have other financing options as well? Right? Can be a supply chain financing, can be PO based financing, but then that goes in debt financing route. Or as I gave you the chauffeur example, I have a great dhanda. I just need small capital, which I can raise from a friends and family and an angel and a customer kind of a round, and then just मैं धंधा बनाते रहूंगा, right? So I think these are what I would suggest are the major two gaps.
So now, I just have one last question. How Gurpreet is doing now?
Acha, Gurpreet is doing well. Gurpreet is back to his family business. He's back in Delhi. So yeah, I think, but that was a fun time at Annamalai which we had. But then again, I think that was also a learning in itself, is because that was the first time you see different cultures and you see different people think in different ways, right? I think that's the beauty of our country also, which I would say is within one particular state, it's like you're changing countries and continents, right? And this is the same conversation which we have with people. For example, you go A to Z, religion same रहता है, language same रहती है. यहाँ पर आप यहाँ से वहां जाओ, हिंदी बोलने का तरीका चेंज हो जाता है, उसे जाओ फिर लैंग्वेज भी चेंज हो जाती है, फिर रहन सहन बदलते रहता है, राइट? सो working in a country like India teaches you a lot of things. Having said that, working on a global perspective teaches you about the quality of work as well. I think one more thing which as Indians and entrepreneurs, what we really need to learn is basically a respecting time, right? अगर, and this is something which I actually learned at Zomato, by the way, until date it is followed. अगर हमारी मीटिंग 9 बजे की होती थी hypothetically, 8:50 to 8:55 log in करते थे हम, right? The idea is if you're logging in at 9 a.m., you're already late. If you're logging in at 9:05, you're not late, you've missed the bus. If you're logging in at 8:50 or 8:55, that is when you're on time, right? So I think Respecting time is
Because I
important.
was not expecting you that you will join in maybe 12 minutes prior to the timing. I was just setting up the stuff.
No, no. So I think but that helps, right? Now, for example, interestingly, so at Allocator One, there's this one gentleman called Tim. So he's been a German footballer, by the way. He's also part of the company. He's an investor. He's a venture partner, and he's also basically helping the firm scale, right? He and I are the only two people who will always be 5-8 minutes before on the call, right? So
So
that
it's
is
there. It's there. Now also when I go for meeting, it's there. I'm always on the IST. They have their own definition of IST.
वो अलग ही उनका बेसिकली वो चलता है बट आई थिंक दैट एज इंडियंस आई थिंक वी शुड चेंज respecting time yourselves and the other person's time is really important. And I think the second thing is basically taking shortcuts, right? I think taking shortcuts is not going to help. Is This is a fundamental difference which I have seen from working from an Indian landscape to a global landscape, is because हमारे को बेसिकली एक चीज होती है कि क्वांटिटी ऑफ थिंग्स निकालो, राइट? एंड दैट्स द नेचर ऑफ वर्किंग. हफ्ते में 20 एक्सेल करो, 6 पीपीटी बनाओ, मैनेजर लगा हुआ है, फट 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 भाई करते रहे करते रहे करते रहे, मतलब फैक्ट्री बना दी है भाई, राइट? आई डोंट थिंक दैट्स द राइट वे. I would rather now go is, instead of making 20 Excels, boss, make 5, but make them so good that no one can raise a question. होगा क्या, तुम 20 बनाते हो, 20 में 6 डाउट आते हैं, अगले हफ्ते तुम वही 6 चीज पकड़ रहे होते हो, यार इससे अच्छा एक ही बार ही ठीक कर देते, right?
Mm,
So I think respecting time, and I think going to the depth of things to get
mm,
clarity. These are the two things, if basically anyone is able to pick on, वो automatically आपके results और output में quality दिखने लग जाएगी.
mm. तो
Yeah.
क्वालिटी ओवर क्वांटिटी तब जाके इवेंचुअली मूवमेंट आएगा बिकॉज अदरवाइज तो हम लोग बहुत फॉन्ड ऑफ थे मल्टीटास्किंग और इसके नाउ थिंग्स आर मूविंग टुवर्ड्स द डिफरेंट डायरेक्शन.
Specialization and going deep into things, I think, is important now.
So that is it, Mohit. Thank you so much. I am actually would like to say that ये मुझे लग रहा था कि this might go in a little finance world and layman might have some difficulty to understand like layman like me. But you told us so much in detail, in depth, in a layman language, and no covers which were left there.
ये
So
बोला
thank
ना,
you
ये
so much for
एमबीए
that.
एमबीए ना करने का फायदा.
That's true.
अपने को
अच्छी
समझ
बात
में
है.
आ. But thank you so much for this.
नहीं.
It was great. I hope the folks who end up seeing see some value in it. And it's been a
Sure.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure is all ours.